Scary Parrish, welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds. Leaky Black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to the like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, I'd love it if you did that while you were here. Let's get into it. Big breaking news this morning. AJ Dybantsa, the top-ranked high school prospect in the country, has publicly announced a commitment to Brigham Young University. The other finalists were Alabama, Kansas, and North Carolina. But for a while now, everybody has known or at least assumed that Dybantsa would announce for BYU, in part because of a massive NIL package that could be the biggest ever delivered to a men's college basketball player. Still hearing that the best amateur basketball player in the country, who was born and raised in New England, hearing him announce for BYU is a notable development, mostly because it was unimaginable pre-NIL. So Norlander, let's start there. Is this as simple as BYU offered more money than anybody else, and that's really all that mattered to AJ Dybantsa and his family, or is there more to it than that?
I think there is more to it. I think the money is a big factor. Before we get out of here, we might need to talk about how this affects the more of us movement, and we have to at least acknowledge the elephant in the room regarding that. Huge development for BYU, and the money is significant. I think that AJ Dybantsa, although there's no way of truly fact-checking this in the history of college athletics, as I understand it, he stands to make well north of $5 million in NIL opportunities right now, let alone what that could grow to be by the time he gets to college and what comes with it. He has already signed lucrative deals with Nike and Red Bull. I don't know. Red Bull, by the way, has caffeine. I have no idea how this works with the Mormon faith. And if you attend BYU, can he drink the Red Bull? Can the Red Bull even get on campus? I have no idea how that works. But regardless,
I know coffee's a problem. I'm less clear on Red Bull, but it's something that needs to be discussed. Honestly, it's something that probably already needed to be discussed.
I agree. I don't have that answer for you right now, but it has already been a question that has been floated out there. If this guy's going to BYU and he has this huge sponsorship with Red Bull, can he actually drink it on campus? I don't know. I do think that he is being paid more and stands to be paid more to attend college as a college athlete than maybe anyone in history. When we're talking, he's going to clear $5 million by the time he steps on campus. I don't even.
You better remember that there's a sport called college football.
You think there was a college football player before they had played a down of college football that was ever paid this amount of money? I don't think there was. Now,
I believe there have been
fact check that, but like that amount of money, especially in a previous generation, before we had inflation, I don't know. It's to me, it sounds like it could really be record breaking in scope here. And as I wrote over the summer, GP, Cooper Flagg could wind up being the best freshman in the country this season. Who knows? Maybe he goes on to win National Player of the Year. We don't know. Duke's off to a good start, and there's a lot of good candidates. But for as good as a freshman as Cooper Flagg stands to be, AJ Dybantsa might actually be better. Now, he's not going to maybe be as well-rounded of a player, but I think he has a chance to lead the country in scoring as a freshman, which obviously basically almost never happens. Incredible skill set, and I think it's because of his skill set. And you mentioned, is it just the money? The money undeniably is a major factor here. Let's be real. He's from Massachusetts. He played out in California a season ago during the high school season, and now he's at Utah Prep. And some of that is obviously financially based. But BYU, coached by Kevin Young, a guy with deep ties to the NBA, coached in the NBA for more than a year, could have been a head coach. Him being involved here is a significant factor as well, from what I was told. And, Igor Demin, who's on the roster right now for BYU, could wind up being a top 10 pick next June. So he is already developing NBA level talent. So a variety of reasons, but no doubt about it, him going to BYU and the money being a major factor was a driving factor. I was told by two reliable sources that Alabama couldn't meet the asking price. They couldn't get there. North Carolina was aggressively willing to get there and selling Dybantsa on this. There's Michael Jordan. There's Vince Carter. There's Jerry Stackhouse. There's AJ Dybantsa. If you want to be the face of college basketball, You come to North Carolina. Look at what Zion Williamson did. He got a $50 million shoe deal because he chose to play at Duke instead of Clemson before landing at an NBA franchise, which isn't an ultimate, dream destination with the New Orleans Pelicans. We don't know where AJ Dybantsa will wind up playing in the NBA, but if you want to maximize your potential and exposure, this was Carolina's selling point. Ultimately, though, Dybantsa, and I frankly, I respect the move. He did not want to pick a blue blood program. Yes, Carolina and Kansas were among his so-called Final Four. My understanding is BYU essentially beat out Alabama and North Carolina, but he was never going to want to play for a blue blood program. And to me, this is super interesting. I do love seeing players take decisions and routes that are different from what you might expect. The biggest programs are almost always going to get the best players, but I like a plot twist. And AJ Dybantsa, who may prove to be a generational level talent, scoring talent at the college level, opting to go to BYU of all places. Last huge recruit there of note, Sean Bradley, Danny Ainge, shouts to Brandon Davies. I think this is a pretty wild development for college hoops.
A lot of interesting stuff here. Let me talk through a few of them, and then I want to ask you a question. One, a thing I like about this is that when we first started imagining NIL and what it would be and what it would look like and what it would do, there was a certain segment of fans that would say things like, it's just going to be a rich get richer thing. It just means Kentucky and Duke are going to buy all the best players. And what we're actually seeing is something that I had suggested would be true before we got to this point, which is maybe, but the great thing about NIL and a lack of structure is that if you want to be good and you got the resources to be good, you can be. Your money spends the same way as Kentucky and Duke's if you're willing to put it out there. And so here's a situation where there is no scenario the top-ranked high school player in America from New England would be considering BYU for NIL. Like, that's not hyperbole. This would never happen. But you hire a coach with an NBA background that can serve as like a starter conversation. Then you rope in a billionaire who's willing to throw all sorts of money at it, and this is the type of thing you get. Keep in mind right now, if you think AJ Dybantsa is going to be the highest paid incoming basketball player in history and one of the highest paid incoming college freshmen in history, think about what Coleman Hawkins is, what Great Osobor is, and where they're playing right now. The highest paid incoming freshman could be at BYU, and perhaps, because we don't know this stuff for sure, but perhaps, let's just keep it factual, two of the highest paid transfer portal guys in college basketball right now are at Washington and Kansas State, right? So if you have a coach who understands how to rally the money and a fan base that is willing to provide you with it, even BYU can go out and sign somebody, secure a commitment from somebody the level of AJ Dybantsa, who has no actual geographical ties to the school, except for the fact he was financially motivated to move to Utah to complete high school. So there's that. I don't know everything that went into his decision. I also don't really care. Like if it really is as simple as this is where I can make the most money, it's fine with me. He ain't the first or last person who will make a decision, a life-changing decision based on where they can make the most money. So I think it's totally reasonable to highlight that and also say I'm fine with it. I don't want to bury the lead at all. This young man is awesome.
He is,
and we
offensively incredible.
We should maybe focus on that a little bit. He's awesome.
And by the way, but while also acknowledging real quick that like there's never a sure guarantee thing or anything like that. I'm just telling you, watching him play in person. The word I use to describe his game is loud. I mean, he is long, rangy, can shoot from deep, shoot from the mid-range. The classic comp. I'm not saying he's going to be this player, okay? But you can see a lot of pieces that made Kevin Durant immediately great as a college freshman. If that winds up translating with AJ Dybantsa at BYU, I will not be surprised whatsoever. He has incredible offensive potential. I talked to some NBA people over the summer, and they project him to be a player who is more likely than not, by the time he gets to his mid-20s, to eventually lead the NBA in scoring.
If you told me he stays healthy, I would tell you I would bet some money right now that he will be a scoring champion someday in the NBA. He led Peach Jam in scoring 2 summers ago when he had just completed his freshman year of high school. Now, he was an older freshman. The context matters. I guess technically it should have been, I believe, coming off of his sophomore year of high school, but it was.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was technically he was just finished his freshman year of high school, went to Peach Jam, led the whole thing in scoring. That's
And
not
by the way,
normal.
he's only he's 5 weeks younger than Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg obviously reclassified. Dybantsa didn't. So Dybantsa's in the same class as the Boozer twins, who will be playing next season at Duke.
So 6'9", wing, the KD stuff. I'm always hesitant to say things like that, but like that's what you think of when you're watching him. It just is. He looks the part, man. One of the things I always say about prospects of this caliber, and I remember thinking it about Derrick Rose, thinking it about Kevin Durant, thinking it about Greg Oden. It's like you don't have to have a 24/7 subscription to know what you're watching when you walk in a gym. You walk in a gym, you and I have been in these things a million times for, in my case, more than 2 decades, and in yours, more than a decade. You could walk in a gym sometimes and there's a top 30 kid there and a top 60 kid there, and it all just kinds of blends in. But when you see somebody like AJ Dybantsa, there ain't no blending in. You don't have to know nothing about nothing. You go, my God, what is that? He's different than everybody else. Young players love to say, I'm different. He's different. Most of them ain't, if we're being honest. This dude is. He's special. I spent some time with him at Peach Jam. Sat down with him for about 30 minutes, talked to him. Talked to us. I was really impressed by him. I found him to be an impressive young man. Seemed sharp. Seemed to come from a good family. Had a good, structure and base there. I'm talking about this from a distance, obviously, but I was impressed by him in the conversation that I was able to have with them. And then the basketball stuff is easy to say. You mentioned that Alabama couldn't meet the price. I do think, despite everything I'm saying right now, there's a reasonable argument to be made that it's just not a wise investment to spend $5 million on a freshman basketball player that you're going to have for 5 months. Like, hey, can we take, if I'm Alabama, if I'm Nate Oats, I go, okay, listen, we'd love to have him, but what else could we do with that $5 million? So I just give it to one guy who's going to be here for 1 year. I think that's a reasonable conversation to have. Either way, BYU decided we're going to do it, so it's done. Here's the question I want to ask you, because everybody listening right now is very familiar with Cooper Flagg and not as familiar with AJ Dybantsa. Right now, they are projected to be the top 2 picks in the next 2 drafts.
Mm-hmm.
Just to provide some context here so people understand who we're talking about and what we're talking about. And I'm not trying to lead you down a direction. Answer this however you feel you should answer it. But if I threw them both in a draft right now, Cooper Flagg and AJ Dybantsa, and you got to pick one of them, which one are you taking?
I would take Dybantsa.
Me too.
And I had this in my summer feature. I talked to about, I think it was like between 12 and 14, either scouts, a couple coaches, but it was mostly NBA people. And I said, you get one player's future. You get Flagg, you get Dybantsa, or you get Tyron Stokes, who's the projected #1 player in the next class. And Dybantsa got more votes than Flagg and Stokes combined.
Right.
I would go Dybantsa while acknowledging they're all tremendous prospects. And in fact, a college basketball setup just to really thrive off of this, having these amazing talents there. And again, the fact that provided this winds up being the case and, we get to next season and he is in a BYU uniform, I find it fascinating. I do. Now, there are downsides. We got to see what Rutgers is going to do with maybe top 5 picks. Will they miss the tournament? Ben Simmons and LSU, that was a flameout. Anthony Edwards at Georgia did nothing. We have had instances where top 3 level prospects have picked unconventional routes to play. And Patrick Baldwin Jr., he wasn't at this level, but he was a good player and decided to play for his father at mid-major, and we saw what happened there.
Once upon a time, I mean, we're going way back here, but DeJuan Wagner goes to Memphis, NIT.
Exactly. So that route is on the table. But Kevin Young, NBA background, we'll see what BYU can do this year. There are some different elements to it. To me, it is super, super fascinating. It has a little bit of pick your player, but really Travis Hunter at Colorado. Travis Hunter, before he went and played for Deion Sanders at Jackson State, where he started, clearly identified as this elite super special prospect. He goes and plays for Deion Sanders. Now, Kevin Young is not wired like Deion Sanders or anything like that, but there's just a lot of fascinating stuff here. And one more, I do want to point out one other thing, GP, and then you can take it where you want, and we can wrap if you want. There's another through line here. Dybantsa grew up in Massachusetts. When this was happening, Danny Ainge was a longtime GM of the Celtics, and now he's involved with the Utah Jazz. And I'm not saying that Danny Ainge delivered AJ Dybantsa to BYU, because that's not what happened. But you have people like that I think play a heavy role, and I know Ainge was very aware of Dybantsa's talents. And Ryan Smith, who is a BYU booster, he is a multi-billionaire. He owns the Jazz. He owns the Utah Hockey Club, the new NHL franchise there. So the LDS Church has a lot of money. These also played significant factors in leading him to play for the Cougars.
All right. Before we get out of here, I think people are expecting us to address the elephant in the room.
Yes.
This isn't only interesting because AJ Dybantsa, the number one prospect in the country, has picked something less than a blue blood program from the Big 12. But he has picked a school where there's a lot of places where you could slip up and find yourself in hot water, so to speak. You don't believe me? Ask Brandon Davies. He's lived this life before. What do you make of the best basketball player in high school picking a university where, and I'm not even joking, this is just true.
Yes.
If you were caught having premarital sex, consuming alcohol, tobacco, drugs, or coffee, you could be punished, in some cases all the way up to expulsion. For people who don't realize how Brandon Davies became a running joke in this thing, he was quite literally suspended from a basketball team after allegations of having premarital sex. It might have cost Jimmer Fredette a trip to the Final Four.
It really might have. Man, what a story to think back on. And they don't mess around. The honor code at BYU is an extreme. It's not. In fact, I was talking with someone really recently about this very thing, where the conversation was a bit like, okay, how serious when it comes to the student athletes, the players, the high level players, is there maybe some room for interpretation? The answer was no.
I've heard.
No.
I don't even want to get into it because I'm way in over my head. I've heard contradicting opinions on that.
Okay.
That it depends on who you are.
Ask Brandon Davies, GP.
Well, I'm not even going to get into why people had told me that was an issue, whereas it might not have been somewhere else. But I'm just saying I've heard contradicting opinions. I've heard some people suggest, like anything else in life, it can come down to who are you, who were you with, blah, 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 blah. Either way, it is true. You can face real consequences for doing things that, I'm trying to speak about this as factually as I can.
Yeah.
Without a smirk. You can get seriously punished for doing things that the majority of young people in this country just do.
And there's a dynamic here where this ultra talented basketball player has the world at his fingertips. It's super interesting dynamic, GP.
Yeah, I'll say this and then we can, and I'm not even trying to be funny. I'm just being completely honest. That unless I were really about that life, and I mean, I fit in on that campus. They ain't asking me to not do nothing. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I'm about this life, man. You ain't even got to tell me not to drink. I don't want to. You ain't even got to tell me not to look over here. I don't even want to. Unless I was really about that life, there is no scenario I would put myself in this position. None. Zero. I mean that sincerely. I would tell my father or mother or agent or anybody, I want you to go out and fill the best offers, and we will settle on the one that comes from, I want the best offer from the school where I can hook up with a cheerleader, get caught, nobody cares. You telling me I go to school, I can go out, get 35 points tonight at Allen Fieldhouse, fly back home, hook up with a dime piece, have a beer, and that might be it for me? And I know that that's almost certainly not going to happen, but just the idea that it could would make me go somewhere else.
It's a compelling storyline all the same. There are more of us than there are of them, but hey, listen, we're going to, it's a big win for the thems. And we have some thems that are dedicated podcast listeners. and don't begrudge the reality that there are more of us than there are of them.
That's right.
This is
Oh, let me be clear.
a huge day for the thems, GP. I mean,
it's a big day for the
is an
thems.
all-timer. It really is.
It's a big day for the thems. And I want to be clear. I don't understand the thems, but I also don't want to disparage them. I'm being sincere here. If this is really the life you're about, do it, man. I don't
by
care.
all means, yeah, live the life you want to live.
It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just saying, if it were me, woo, I just, I don't think I'd be able to do it. I was always way too interested in a lot of the stuff that gets you in trouble at a place like that.
I want to know from the hardcore BYU fans, how close on the Joseph Smith chart is AJ Dybantsa at this point? Like, is he one chair over, a couple chairs over? I'm just curious on this because this is, what an era we're about to enter into. The idea that this player from the other side of the country is going to play, and while there are many valid reasons to it, also being monetarily driven, by all means, man, go get that cash. Let's put on a show, and let's see what we get at BYU with potentially the best scorer in the sport playing there next season. Cool story. And yeah, we had to hop on for an emergency podcast. More than happy to do it. Obviously, as we get closer to next year, Dybantsa will be a bigger and bigger deal, a bigger and bigger story. But he gets it done today. And I appreciate him, by the way, doing this now and not dragging this out to January, February, March. Just make the commitment. And now the most notable players on the board for 2025, they're done. Got the Boozer twins going to Duke. That's the one bummer, GP. We didn't get Dybantsa at UNC, Boozer twins at Duke. That would have been kind of cool in the same conference. But regardless, BYU it is. And a new era awaits.
And you know what? Like, there have been cases in the past where coaches will schedule a game simply because they have enrolled two of the best dudes that people want to see. The one that pops into my head, OJ Mayo goes to USC, Derrick Rose goes to Memphis. I was sitting in the bleachers with Tim Floyd and John Calipari, like literally sitting with them in Las Vegas as they were watching Derrick and OJ and talking about scheduling this game. All right, you get that done, I'll get this done, we'll play. I think they ended up playing in the Garden. And it wasn't because anybody wanted to see Memphis and USC. It was because people wanted to see OJ Mayo and Derrick Rose on the same court or something like that. So there's a chance now BYU can go out and create games that it otherwise would not be able to create.
And it should, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, you want to go play a one-off in the Garden? We could probably get that done for you.
You want
to play a one-off at TD?
No, better in
TD
Boston,
Garden.
TD Garden. Yeah. Gotta make
you want to play a one-off at TD Garden? Let's go do that. So this type of enrollment opens up just incredible opportunities for you. Once upon a time, famously, Davidson played in the Jimmy V. Why? Because they had Steph Curry. Now BYU's got a guy that people are going to want to put on a stage. And I'll be interested to see the non-league schedule BYU puts together in advance of next season. Is that a podcast? Let's go.
That's an emergency podcast.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend.
Shouts to Brandon Davies. What the hell?
Shouts to Brandon Davies, man. You deserve.
What is Brandon Davies doing today?
I know what I hope he's doing.
How will Brandon?
I know what
Brandon Davies celebrate. We got to wrap this spot.
I know what I hope he's doing. I hope he's making up for lost time. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcast, Apple, Spotify. More of us than there are of them still. Still today, more of is a good day for the thems. I'm not trying to take none away from them, but there's more of us than there are of you. That's still true. We'll talk to you again next time. Until then, take care.